Under the ruthless Arizona sun, a dying German shepherd staggered along the highway, ribs showing, paws burned raw. Yet she refused to collapse. Strapped to her back was a small red backpack she guarded like a vow. Cars sped past, no one stopped, until a young ex-Navy SEAL recognized the look in her eyes, the look of someone holding the line so others might survive. What was hidden in that backpack and why dangerous men wanted her back will stay with you long after this ends. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe loyalty should never be abandoned, hit subscribe. The heat over Yuma, Arizona, did not shimmer politely. It pressed down with intent. At exactly noon, the sky was a bleached, pitiless blue, scrubbed of clouds as if mercy itself had been edited out. The asphalt stretching beyond the city limits looked less like a road and more like a strip of molten metal hammered flat across the desert. Heat waves distorted the horizon, bending telephone poles into wavering silhouettes. Even the wind had given up. There was no breeze, only stillness and sun. Ethan Cole drove through it alone. He was 28, broad-shouldered in the quiet, compact way of a man shaped by discipline rather than vanity. His dark hair was cropped short, grown out just enough since leaving the Navy to soften the hard military lines at his temples. His face was lean, tanned deeply by years of training under open skies, with a faint scar along his jaw that caught the light when he turned his head. His eyes, steel blue and habitually scanning, looked forward without urgency, as if the road itself were a suggestion rather than a destination. The truck was old, a sun-faded pickup with a cracked dashboard and seats worn thin enough to show the stitching beneath. It rattled softly as it moved, protesting the heat like everything else in southern Arizona that summer. Ethan had no schedule to keep. He had been discharged from the Navy SEALs less than 3 months earlier, his final paperwork signed, his gear turned in, his body declared intact. Officially, nothing was wrong with him. Unofficially, something had stayed behind on his last deployment, something heavy, unnamed, and persistent. He drove now because movement felt easier than stillness, because when the engine hummed and the road unspooled ahead of him, the silence inside his head softened. He passed other vehicles, families sealed behind tinted windows, long-haul trucks roaring past in bursts of displaced air. No one slowed. No one looked twice at the shoulder of the road. Then the pattern broke. Ethan saw it not as a thought, but as a reflex, a shape where there should not have been one. He eased his foot off the accelerator, eyes narrowing. At first it was only motion, uneven, staggered. Then posture, height, intent. A dog. A German shepherd, tall but frighteningly thin, moving along the gravel shoulder with a sway that spoke of exhaustion rather than injury. Her coat, once black and rich tan, was dulled by dust and sun, clinging to her ribs like fabric stretched too tight. Her tongue lolled, darkened and dry. Each step looked negotiated, chosen carefully, as though the ground itself were hostile. Strapped awkwardly across her back was a small red backpack. Old, scuffed, its color muted by layers of desert dust. One strap had been repaired with knotted cord, the fabric frayed where it rubbed against her shoulders. Behind her came 2 puppies. They were German shepherds as well, no more than a few months old, their ears not yet fully upright, their bodies all legs and uncertainty. They moved in short, faltering bursts, stopping often, sides heaving. One stumbled and went down on the gravel, scrambling clumsily back up as the other nudged at its flank. No leash, no shade, no water. Ethan checked his mirrors automatically. Cars flew past. No brake lights. No hesitation. He pulled over without thinking. The truck's tires crunched onto the shoulder, heat radiating up through the soles of his boots as he stepped out. The air hit him like a wall, thick and scorching, stealing moisture from his breath before it could reach his lungs. The dog stopped when she heard him. not running, not retreating. She turned, placing herself instantly between Ethan and the puppies. Her stance shifted. Front legs spread slightly, weight balanced despite her exhaustion. Her head lowered just enough to signal readiness, not aggression. Eyes alert, assessing. Ethan recognized it at once. Guard posture. He moved slowly, palms open, crouching just enough to make himself smaller. His voice, when he spoke, was low and steady, shaped by years of calming frightened recruits, and worse. "Hey," he said. "Easy, I'm not a threat." The puppies huddled closer together, pressing into their mother's hind legs. The shepherd did not bare her teeth. She did not growl. She simply held the line. Ethan glanced at the ground. The gravel shimmered with heat. He could feel it burning through his boots. Their paws must have been blistered raw. He retrieved a bottle of water from the truck and poured a small amount into the metal lid of his thermos, setting it several feet away. He did not push it closer. He waited. The dog's nose twitched. She did not move. Only when Ethan stepped back another pace did she advance, cautiously, each step measured. She drank sparingly, stopping often, lifting her head to check on the puppies before returning to the water. When she finished, she did not relax. She repositioned herself directly in front of the backpack, blocking it with her chest. Ethan frowned slightly. He repeated the process for the puppies, giving them only enough to wet their mouths, cooling their bellies with a damp cloth torn from his spare shirt, shielding them from the sun with his jacket stretched across the rocks. The shepherd watched him the entire time. Even weakened, she tracked his movements with disciplined precision, and when one puppy whimpered, she nudged it closer beneath her, angling her body to keep both pups in shade. Ethan felt something tighten behind his ribs. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. There had been men like this dog, men who stayed standing when they should have fallen, men who absorbed heat and fear and pain so others could move. A memory surfaced uninvited. Dust-filled air, a different sun, someone shouting, "Go!" while staying behind. The memory cut short before it could fully form, like a door closing before it slammed. Ethan exhaled slowly. "You're doing your job," he murmured. "Aren't you?" The shepherd's ears flicked at his voice, but she did not move from the backpack. He studied it now, the faded red fabric, the way it was cinched tight despite her condition. Whatever it held mattered. Not food, not comfort. Something else. Ethan did not touch it. Instead, he shifted his truck slightly to cast more shadow across the shoulder, then sat down on the tailgate, keeping his presence calm and non-invasive. Time passed. Heat roared. Trucks screamed by. The dog never once lay down. She stood swaying slightly, guarding. And in that stillness, under the merciless Arizona sun, Ethan understood something without words. This was not abandonment. This was a post, and the one standing guard had not yet been relieved. The interior of the pickup felt like a different world. The moment Ethan closed the doors, the roar of the desert dulled into a muted hum, and the air conditioning, old, wheezing but determined, began to push back against the heat. At first it only spat out warm breath, but Ethan cranked the dial all the way over and kept driving, one hand tight on the wheel, the other steadying the rearview mirror as he watched the back seat. The German shepherd mother stood there at first, braced awkwardly against the seat, legs locked as if the truck were still moving beneath her. Dust flaked from her coat onto the upholstery. Her ribs expanded and collapsed in shallow, rapid breaths. The red backpack remained strapped across her back, crooked but secure. The puppies were worse off. They lay on their sides on a folded jacket Ethan had thrown across the seat, chests fluttering, paws twitching weakly. Ethan glanced at them every few seconds, measuring their breathing the way he once measured pulse rates in the dark. "Easy," he murmured, more to himself than to them. "Almost there." The dog's ears flicked at his voice. She did not sit. She did not relax. Instead, she lowered her head until her muzzle pressed against the backpack as if grounding herself through it. Her eyes, amber, bloodshot, but fiercely alert, tracked Ethan's movements through the mirror. Not fear, assessment. Ethan recognized that look. It was the same way men watched a new lieutenant step into a hot zone. Not hostile, just waiting to see if he knew what he was doing. He drove faster than he liked, slower than the situation demanded, threading the narrow balance between urgency and control. The outskirts of Yuma slid past in a blur of low buildings and heat-blasted scrub. His phone buzzed once on the passenger seat. No service. But he ignored it. The only thing that mattered now was keeping them alive until help could take over. The Second Chance Veterinary Clinic sat on the edge of a strip of auto shops and abandoned storefronts, its pale stucco walls glowing almost white under the sun. Ethan pulled into the lot hard enough that gravel snapped beneath the tires. He cut the engine and was out of the truck before the fan stopped spinning. The dog was already moving. She stumbled as she jumped down, her legs nearly folding beneath her weight, but she recovered instantly, pivoting so her body shielded the puppies as Ethan lifted them out one at a time. Each one was lighter than it should have been. Too light. Inside, the clinic smelled of antiseptic and dry air. A bell chimed weakly as the door swung open. A woman in blue scrubs looked up from behind the counter, surprise flashing across her face. She was in her late 30s, with dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail and tired eyes that suggested long shifts and not enough sleep. Her posture straightened the instant she saw the animals. "Oh," she started, then stopped, professional instincts snapping into place. "Get them in here, now." Her name badge read Dr. Lena Alvarez. She moved quickly, efficiently, directing a younger technician. Mark, early 20s, thin, pale, with nervous hands and an earnest expression, to bring a gurney. The puppies were lifted first, their small bodies wrapped in towels and carried into the back. The shepherd mother followed, limping but determined, every step measured. Dr. Alvarez crouched in front of her, eyes scanning from burned paw pads to heaving sides. She spoke softly, her voice calm and grounded. "You're safe," she said, though the dog did not seem to be listening. "We've got you." The shepherd froze when Mark reached toward her back. It happened in an instant. Her body went rigid, muscles locking as if a switch had been thrown. She lunged, not forward but sideways, placing herself between the technician's hand and the red backpack. A low sound tore out of her chest. Not a growl exactly, but something rawer. Panic layered over exhaustion. Mark stumbled back, hands raised. "Whoa!" Dr. Alvarez held up a hand. "Stop! Everyone stop!" Ethan stepped in without thinking, positioning himself at the dog's shoulder, not touching her, just present. "She's protecting it," he said quietly. "Whatever's in that pack." Dr. Alvarez studied the animal again, this time with new eyes. The way she stood despite tremors running through her legs. The way her head never strayed far from the backpack. "All right," the doctor said after a beat. "We don't touch it." Mark blinked. "But her back?" "We work around it," Dr. Alvarez cut in. Her tone was firm, practiced. "IV fluids, cooling pads, check the paws. No sudden movements." The dog's breathing slowed slightly, though she did not relax. Ethan stayed where he was, one hand hovering near her shoulder without making contact, grounding without restraining. As the staff worked, Dr. Alvarez spoke in short, efficient phrases. Severe dehydration, heat exhaustion, early signs of infection in the pads. Treatable, if they moved carefully. The shepherd endured it all without snapping. She flinched when Celine cooled her skin. She trembled when her paws were wrapped, but she did not resist. Her eyes never left the backpack. Ethan caught his reflection in a metal cabinet and barely recognized the man staring back. jaw tight, shoulders squared, fully present. Outside, through the narrow window near the exam room door, the parking lot shimmered in the heat. That was when he saw it. A black SUV idling 2 spaces down from his truck. Newer model, clean. Windows tinted dark enough that he couldn't see inside. The engine rumbled softly, steady, patient. No one got out. Ethan's gaze lingered just long enough to take it in without staring. His mind cataloged details automatically. The angle of the wheels, the position relative to the entrance, the way the vehicle hadn't been there when he arrived. He looked away first. Dr. Alvarez noticed his shift in focus. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "Just thought I saw someone I knew." She nodded, already turning back to her work. "We'll need to keep her here overnight. Same for the pups. Heat like this, damage isn't always obvious right away." "That's fine," Ethan said. "Whatever they need." The shepherd's ears twitched again at his voice. She leaned, just barely, into the space where his legs stood. Not a request, not comfort, confirmation. Ethan glanced once more toward the window. The SUV was still there, engine running, waiting. And for reasons he couldn't yet name, Ethan knew this wasn't coincidence. The examination room smelled faintly of antiseptic and overheated air. Machines hummed softly, punctuated by the slow drip of fluids feeding into the German shepherd's vein. The puppies slept in a shallow, restless way, their small bodies twitching beneath thin blankets as their systems struggled back from the edge. The mother remained awake. She lay on her side now, finally forced down by exhaustion rather than choice, but her head was still angled toward the red backpack strapped across her back. One ear stayed half lifted, tracking every movement in the room. Her eyes, dulled by dehydration, sharpened whenever someone stepped too close. Dr. Lena Alvarez worked with deliberate care. She was a woman accustomed to pressure, her calm demeanor the product of years spent stabilizing animals who could not explain where it hurt. Her dark brows furrowed as she cleaned the inflamed skin along the dog's spine, careful not to disturb the straps more than necessary. "I don't like this," she said quietly, not looking up. Ethan stood near the wall, arms folded loosely, posture relaxed in appearance only. "The injury?" "That too," she replied. "But mostly the behavior. This isn't random fear. She's guarding." As if to prove the point, the dog shifted when Mark, the young technician, adjusted a light. Her muscles tightened instantly, a tremor running through her frame. "It's okay," Dr. Alvarez murmured. "Nobody's taking anything." As she worked, one of the worn straps loosened slightly under her fingers. The buckle gave a faint click. The backpack sagged open. No one moved at first. Inside, instead of food or supplies, lay a small collection of objects that did not belong together, yet somehow did. A child's notebook, its cover faded blue, corners bent soft with use. A USB drive wrapped carefully in a scrap of patterned cloth and tied with thread, and a photograph, old enough that the edges had begun to yellow. Ethan stepped closer. The photo showed a woman in her early 30s, dark-haired and smiling with a tired but genuine warmth. She wore a plain cotton shirt, sleeves rolled to her elbows. Beside her stood a young girl, maybe 7 years old, with long hair pulled into uneven braids and a grin missing one front tooth. Between them sat the German shepherd, younger, fuller, her ears proud and alert. A family. The dog reacted immediately. She tried to rise, a low sound vibrating in her chest, not loud, but urgent. Ethan lifted his hands. "Easy," he said. "No one's touching it." Dr. Alvarez froze, then carefully eased the strap back into place, leaving the backpack exactly where it was. "That's not gear," she said softly. "That's evidence." The word hung in the air. Mark swallowed. "Should we call the police?" Dr. Alvarez looked to Ethan, Her eyes were sharp now, searching his face. "We can. If this animal was abandoned, it's standard procedure. But if someone went to this much trouble to hide things on her back?" She didn't finish the sentence. Ethan nodded once. "I'm not saying no." He crouched near the dog, careful to keep his distance. Her eyes locked on him, reading his intent. "But not yet," he continued. "Not until we know what we're dealing with." "Doctor," Alvarez studied him for a long moment. She saw the discipline in his stance, the quiet authority that didn't ask permission. "All right," she said finally, "but if this turns ugly, I'm making the call." "That's fair." The afternoon wore on. The heat outside refused to break, but inside the clinic, the steady rhythm of treatment began to stabilize the animals. By early evening, the puppies slept more deeply, breath slowing, color returning faintly to their gums. The mother dog's eyes closed for longer stretches, though her body never fully relaxed. Ethan stepped out just before sunset. The parking lot glowed orange beneath the sinking sun. Heat radiated up from the pavement in waves, carrying the scent of dust and oil. Ethan paused, scanning without appearing to. The black SUV sat where it had been earlier. Same position, same idle, same tinted windows. His pulse slowed. He walked to his truck, opened the door, and pretended to search the cab. In the reflection of the window, he watched the SUV. The engine cut. 3 doors opened. 3 men stepped out. They didn't rush. They didn't fan out. They moved with the easy coordination of people accustomed to being obeyed. All 3 wore casual clothes, jeans, plain shirts, nothing distinctive. That was deliberate. The man in the center was tall and lean, mid-40s, with close-cropped hair already going gray at the temples. His face was narrow, his expression neutral in a way that suggested practice rather than calm. His eyes were pale, assessing, and they fixed on Ethan with immediate focus. The second man was broader, heavier through the shoulders, his movements slower but no less controlled. A faded tattoo crept up his forearm, disappearing beneath his sleeve. The third hung back half a step, younger, restless, fingers flexing, as if unused to waiting. The tall man spoke. "That dog isn't yours." His voice was even, not loud, not threatening, just factual. Ethan closed his truck door and turned to face them fully. He kept his hands visible. "She is now," he said. The younger man scoffed, taking a step forward. The tall man lifted one finger, and the movement stopped. "You don't understand," the tall man continued. "That animal belongs to people who want her returned." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "Funny, doesn't look like she belonged to anyone who cared." The man's eyes flickered, just briefly. "Hand her over," he said. "We walk away. This ends clean." Ethan shook his head. Not happening. Silence stretched between them. A car passed on the road beyond the lot, oblivious. The broader man shifted his weight. "You don't know what you're stepping into." "I know exactly what I'm stepping into," Ethan replied. His voice remained level, but something hard settled behind his eyes. "And you picked the wrong day." The tall man studied him more closely now, noticing the stance, the stillness. Recognition dawned, not of identity, but of capability. "All right," he said at last. "We tried polite." He took a step back. The others followed without argument. "No noise," he added, almost casually. "For now." They returned to the SUV, doors closing with soft, deliberate clicks. The engine started. The vehicle rolled out of the lot without hurry, melting into traffic as the last of the sun slipped below the horizon. Ethan stood where he was long after they were gone. His chest felt tight, not with fear, but with confirmation. This wasn't abandonment. This was pursuit. Inside the clinic, the German shepherd stirred, a low whine escaping her throat as if she felt the shift in the air. Ethan went back in, stopping beside her. "You weren't lost," he murmured, watching her eyes open and find him again. "You were hiding." And someone had noticed. The motel room was dim even before the lights went out. Ethan sat at the small round table near the window, the curtains half drawn against the desert night. Outside, the air still shimmered with heat, though the sun had been gone for hours. Neon from a flickering vacancy sign painted the cracked stucco walls in tired reds and blues. On the bed nearest the wall, the German shepherd lay on her side, IV bandage still wrapped around one foreleg, her breathing steadier now, but far from strong. The two puppies slept pressed together in a cardboard box padded with towels, their small chests rising and falling in uneven rhythm. The red backpack rested against the table leg, exactly where the dog could see it. Ethan plugged the USB drive into his laptop, careful to keep the volume low. The screen lit his face in pale blue as folders opened one by one. Spreadsheets, scanned documents, video clips, time-stamped months apart. Numbers, names, transfer paths looping across borders like invisible highways. "This is big," said the man leaning against the doorframe. Daniel Hargrove looked nothing like a federal agent at first glance. Early 40s, average height, lean to the point of looking unfinished. He wore faded jeans and a plain gray T-shirt that clung to his narrow shoulders. His hair was sandy blonde, thinning slightly at the crown, and his face bore the faint creases of someone who squinted too often into sun and paperwork alike. But his eyes were sharp, quietly alert, always tracking. Ethan had known him years ago under very different circumstances. Back when Daniel had worn body armor instead of cotton, when they'd shared briefings in silence rather than motel rooms and secrets. "She found it," Ethan said, scrolling through a file labeled only with a date. "All of it?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Marisol Vega wasn't supposed to be that good. Accountants usually aren't." A photograph filled the screen. Marisol seated at a kitchen table, papers spread around her, the same tired smile from the picture in the backpack. A video followed, shaky but clear, showing her recording herself in a whisper, glancing over her shoulder every few seconds. "She knew they'd come," Daniel said. "Once money like this starts moving, someone always notices." Ethan glanced toward the dog. She had lifted her head slightly, ears twitching as if sensing the weight in the room. "She didn't run." "No," Daniel replied. "She hid it, put it somewhere no one would think to look." The truth settled into place with brutal clarity. Marisol hadn't trusted banks or safes. She hadn't trusted people. She had trusted instinct, and the one creature who had never failed her. She'd strapped the evidence to the dog, pointed her north, and hoped the world still had room for someone decent. Daniel closed the laptop gently. "I've already flagged this, quietly. My team's an hour out." Ethan exhaled through his nose. "They already found us once." Daniel's gaze sharpened. "Then we assume they'll try again." As if summoned by the thought, the lights died. The air conditioner cut off mid-rattle. The room dropped into sudden darkness, broken only by the neon outside and the faint glow of Ethan's laptop screen. The hum of the motel vanished, replaced by an unnatural silence. The German shepherd was on her feet instantly. Her body moved before thought. Placing herself between the bed and the door, shoulders squared, legs braced. The puppy stirred, whimpering softly. Ethan stood, heart rate steady, mind clear. He reached out slowly and rested his hand against the dog's shoulder. She accepted it, leaning just enough to confirm presence, not comfort. A knock sounded. Heavy, deliberate. "Ethan," a voice called through the door. Calm, familiar. "We should talk." Daniel's jaw tightened. He moved to the side of the door, back flat to the wall, eyes on Ethan. No weapons drawn. Not yet. The knock came again, followed by a dull thud as something heavy struck the wood. "Open up," the voice continued. "We don't want to make a mess." The dog growled, low, controlled, vibrating through the room like a warning line drawn in sand. Ethan didn't raise his voice. "You've said what you came to say. Leave." A pause, then a soft chuckle. "You're protecting a dog," the man said. "That's admirable, but misplaced." The door handle rattled, not a forced entry. A test. Daniel checked his watch, subtle, practiced. 20 minutes, he murmured. Maybe less. Ethan nodded once. He stepped closer to the door, close enough that his voice carried without shouting. "She's not for sale, and she's not going anywhere." Silence answered him. Then footsteps. More than before. The power outside flickered, plunging the walkway into deeper shadow. Somewhere down the row, a door slammed as a guest retreated inside, sensing trouble without understanding it. The knock returned. Harder this time. "Last chance," the voice said. "That dog will never be safe with you." Ethan felt the tension coil tighter in his chest, not fear, but focus. He stayed where he was. No threats, no sudden moves, just time. The German shepherd shifted, adjusting her stance despite the tremor in her legs. Pain flashed across her face, but she held position, teeth bared now, not snapping. Warning! Minutes stretched thin. Then, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of engines. Multiple vehicles. Not the smooth idle of an SUV, but the heavier growl of trucks pulling in fast and stopping hard. Red and blue lights spilled across the walls, cutting through the darkness like blades. A curse hissed from the other side of the door. Footsteps retreated. Fast. Ethan opened the curtain just enough to see figures moving at the far end of the lot. 3 shapes melting back into shadow as unmarked vehicles boxed them in from a distance they clearly hadn't anticipated. The door remained closed. No final knock. The German shepherd exhaled slowly, her body sagging only after the threat had passed. Ethan knelt beside her, one hand steady on her chest. "You did good," he said quietly. Daniel allowed himself a thin smile. "They won't push tonight?" "But they'll try again," Ethan replied. Daniel nodded. "Yeah." As agents approached the room, voices low and controlled, Ethan heard the last words thrown from the darkness before the night swallowed them whole. "That dog," the voice said, sharp with promise, "will never be left in peace." The dog's ears flicked. She didn't retreat. She stood. The courthouse in Yuma did not look like a place where endings were decided. It was a low, sand-colored building, practical and unadorned, its windows tinted against the glare. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and old coffee. The proceedings moved without ceremony, but the outcome carried weight far beyond the narrow room. The evidence spoke for itself. Financial records mapped routes of money across borders like scars. Video testimony confirmed timelines. The USB drive, once hidden beneath a layer of dust and fur, now sat sealed in an evidence bag, its contents already copied and verified. Names that had operated in shadow were spoken aloud, stripped of power by repetition. The network collapsed in pieces. Quiet arrests, frozen accounts, doors opened with warrants instead of threats. No headlines, no spectacle. Just the slow, irrevocable unraveling of a system that had believed itself untouchable. And at the center of it all stood a German shepherd. The ruling came late in the afternoon. The judge, an older woman with silver hair pulled into a severe knot, read from the file once more before lifting her eyes. "The animal in question," she said, voice firm, "is hereby recognized as a material witness whose actions directly contributed to the preservation of evidence. Custody shall not revert to any claimant associated with the criminal investigation." Her gaze shifted briefly toward Ethan, then back to the clerk. "She will not be returned." No gavel strike followed. None was needed. Ethan exhaled for the first time in what felt like weeks. Recovery was not dramatic. It was slow and ordinary and stubborn, the way real healing always was. The German shepherd gained weight steadily, muscle returning beneath her coat. Her paws healed, the raw skin toughening again. She slept for long stretches now, deep and unguarded, sometimes twitching as if running in dreams she no longer needed to finish. The puppies bounced back faster, youth on their side, tails wagging with reckless enthusiasm. 2 families came forward within days of each other, both local, both patient. One had a fenced yard and children old enough to understand responsibility. The other was a retired couple who walked every morning at dawn. The puppies left together, crammed into the back of a station wagon, whining more from excitement than fear. The mother watched them go without protest. She stood beside Ethan, posture loose, ears relaxed, tail low, but calm. Her work was done. Ethan took her home. The house sat on the edge of town, modest and quiet, its paint faded by years of sun. It wasn't much, but it had shade and space and a small garage cluttered with boxes Ethan hadn't yet unpacked. The first night, the dog circled the living room twice before settling near the door, habit lingering longer than necessity. "Not a post anymore," Ethan told her softly, spreading a blanket nearby. "You can rest." She looked at him for a long moment. Then, deliberately, she moved away from the door and lay down. He named her Ember the following morning. The word fit, not for fire, but for what remained after it. Heat without flame, strength without urgency. Lucia Vega arrived 3 weeks later. She was smaller than Ethan expected, thin in the careful way of a child who had learned not to take up space. Her hair was dark and fell to her shoulders in uneven waves, tied back with a simple elastic. She wore a faded yellow dress and sneakers scuffed at the toes. A social worker stood a respectful distance behind her, hands clasped, eyes kind. Lucia hesitated at the edge of the driveway, fingers curled into the strap of her backpack. Her gaze fixed on Ember, who lay beneath the porch in the shade, eyes half closed. Ember lifted her head. For a heartbeat, something ancient stirred in her posture, a reflex that had once meant danger. Then it faded. Her tail thumped once against the concrete. Lucia took a step forward. "Hola," she whispered. Ember rose and crossed the distance slowly, stopping a few feet away. She lowered herself to the ground, making herself smaller. Lucia knelt without being told, tears spilling freely now, hands shaking as they reached out. The dog pressed her forehead into the child's chest. They stayed like that for a long time. The red backpack came down that evening. Ethan washed it carefully in the sink, scrubbing away layers of dust until the fabric showed its true color again. He hung it in the garage beside a coil of rope and a spare tire, where sunlight filtered through the open door in soft bands. It looked lighter there, emptied of burden, complete. Lucia stood beside him, watching. "She was brave," the girl said. Ethan nodded. She was? Summer stretched on. The desert softened at the edges, heat losing its sharpest bite as evenings grew longer. Ember claimed the space beneath the porch as her own, rising only when she wished. She no longer tracked every passing sound, no longer scanned the horizon. One night, as the sky burned orange and purple beyond the low hills, Ethan sat beside her with a glass of water sweating in his hand. The world felt still, not empty, just quiet. Ember lay on her side, eyes closed, chest rising in an easy rhythm. Ethan leaned back, muscles finally uncoiling. For the first time since leaving the service, he did not feel the need to stay alert, did not feel the pull to stand watch. The sun slipped below the horizon. Neither of them moved. Some guardians are never trained. They are chosen by love, shaped by loss, and guided by instinct. In everyday life, we pass moments like this all the time. Someone hurting quietly, someone carrying a burden we can't see. Most people keep driving, but sometimes stopping is enough to change everything. Not with strength, not with force, just with the decision to care. This story reminds us that loyalty doesn't always bark loudly, and courage doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it stands patiently in the heat, waiting for the right person to notice. If this story touched you, take a moment to share it with someone who believes in second chances. Leave a comment and tell us what part stayed with you the longest. And if you believe no soul should stand guard forever, subscribe to the channel for more stories of hope, courage, and quiet heroes.